guest, Mr. Sébastien Hug. He is the Consul General of Switzerland. He is the CEO of the Swissnex India. In those roles, Sébastien had a dynamic role to connect Switzerland and India in education, research and innovation. He was the scientific advisor at the State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation. Prior to that, he worked in the USA, also in Canada. Please welcome Mr. Sébastien Hug.
For creating that opportunity. As was mentioned, I work for, so I'm the Consul General in Switzerland, but we work for a special consulate, I like to say. Swissnex is dedicated to education, research and innovation, so that is our main focus here in Bangalore. So we're actually one of 5 offices, the other ones being in Shanghai, Boston, San Francisco and Rio. So the idea is to connect Switzerland with the leading innovation and science hubs in the world. And that's why I'm in India for the next 3 years. To Switzerland until now, hands up. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. So maybe I would just start by, and if we can have the next slide please. Actually start with a small short comparison between Switzerland and Canada. We can just show the next slide. So here, Switzerland and Canada in comparison to put things a little bit into context. So Switzerland is, as you know, quite a small country in the midst of Europe, 41,000 square kilometers, so actually same size as Canada. But as you can see, we have only 8.5 million people, so I think about 4 times less people than Canada in Switzerland, and less people than in Bangalore alone. We have 4 languages, German, French, Italian, and Romansh. And I was looking at some of the exports, and as you can see, we export every year 115 megatons of chocolate, delicious chocolate, I would like to say. Some of that chocolate hopefully here coming to Kerala, whereas for example Kerala I think is exporting 50,000 megatons of delicious cashew nuts. So just to put things a little bit into perspectives. But talking about the Swiss vet system, I'd like to give you an overview of the education system without going into too much details, but maybe starting with my own path. Next slide, please. So that was me a long time ago when I had still a bit more hair on my head. So I was then around, I think, 12, 13 years old, and so that is the period when, as a young boy or girl in Switzerland, you start thinking about your future. And so at that time, actually, I had 2 dreams. So one dream was to become a carpenter, and the other dream was to become a teacher. And my dad was a teacher as well. They would equally support me for both careers, but they would be 2 very different careers in some way. So I actually had then chosen to go for teacher education, and so I went then to the college, to the university, and that's why I'm here today. Not as a teacher, but I somehow took a bit of a different way along the way. But if you want to see, I'm actually rather the minority in Switzerland. So next slide, please. So this is a very sort of simplified version of the Swiss education system. So on the bottom you have, until the years 15 years old, compulsory education. So the same as here, up to grade 9. And that's when you have to take then a decision. Am I going for senior high school? That's what I did. And eventually I went to university. Or do I want to go for, for example, being a carpenter? And then I would go the vocational education training route. And as you can see, actually, in Switzerland, 70% of students choose to go along the VET or VET track. So VET in Switzerland is a largely recognized and accepted, socially accepted education path. And I will go in further details. And one of the reasons why it is accepted is because, if you could just go back, is because, as you can see, when you do like a apprenticeship, and I'll explain how it works in a second, it doesn't end there. So you can further develop yourself, even when you do a diploma, a VET diploma, you can actually, you actually have the opportunity to go to university later on. So I want to maybe focus now on the VET system itself. If you could go to the next slide, please. So as was mentioned, the main characteristic of the VET system in Switzerland is that it is a dual track approach. So it's based on the one hand side on the work-based learning environment, so practice, and on the other hand on the normal school plus environment. So you actually spend 3 to 4 days in a company environment and 1 to 2 days in the classroom instruction. On top of that, you also have classes given by industry associations that make sure that what you learn in the company is eventually the same for everyone. So I think the Minister mentioned that the VT shouldn't be depend on one single company. So I think here we would like to make sure that people who go and learn in companies have the same level of knowledge across all the companies. And so you have to use this dual track approach, and you have different lengths. So the shortest length is a 2-year VET certificate. That's what you get. But most of the courses actually are 3 to 4 years. So it's a substantial length. But there's a reason for that, and I'll explain that in a second. But so it's a 3 or 4 year federal VET diploma that you acquire. And for someone who chooses to go for a VET approach, he can choose about 230 different professions. So if you could go maybe to the next slide. And here are some of the top 10 professions in Switzerland. So most people, about 14,000 students, would choose to go for commercial employees. So commercial employee means basically you work in an office. So you do administrative tasks. And then retail clerks are working in a grocery shop, for example. Healthcare workers, social care workers, electricians, IT, cook, etc., etc. But you have, as I said, 230 different professions. So I think you've seen this slide, but the next slide, please. Oh yeah, so just go to slide back. So what I think, as I mentioned before, something that's really important in that system is that once you got a VET, you can do continuing education and actually also go for tertiary education, so going for university education. So you have the choice either to go for academic university or for a University of Applied Sciences, so there's a bit of a more applied focus, or higher professional education courses. Next slide, please. So there are many different ways actually of develop your skills, develop your career, and when you go for a VET diploma in Switzerland, actually it's just the beginning of the career. It's the beginning of a continuous lifelong learning process, and you have, as I said, many different ways of continuous learning. So either through job-related continuous education training, either by doing another VET training, professional education sectors, so these are like extra courses, or University of Applied Sciences, or the cantonal universities, so the more academic universities. And that is one of the big strengths, I think, of the Swiss VET system, is that it continuously offers these opportunities for Swiss VET students. And as you can see, over the last 10, 12 years now, the number of students that would then actually opt and choose to go for higher education has really increased. So they realize now more and more today that VET is also offers opportunities to grow into other jobs. So the number of tests that have been taken to go to university have really increased, actually fourfold, or at least 3 times over the last 10 years. Next slide, please. So to enable that, you need actually a very strong partnership of three institutions. One is the Confederation, so the federal central government in Switzerland. one other canton. So cantons in Switzerland are the states. And eventually the private sector, and I think I will highlight the role of the private sector, of private industry in this system. So maybe if we go to the next slide. So the tasks is that on the federal level, the State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation, that's where I'm coming from actually, they're in charge of the strategic overall management of that entire system. They make sure that across the different states, the degrees are comparable, that there's a certain transparency, that they're nationally recognized diplomas, and they also, of course, ensure support for innovation and research. And you see at the bottom, maybe you cannot read it, but this is FIVET actually, the Swiss Federal Institute for Vocational Education Training. So we have actually a research institution that focuses on research on vocational education training. So they provide the expertise, they provide the insights to continuously develop that system and improve it and also like promote it in Switzerland. Not only in Switzerland but also abroad, as we will see in a second. Maybe that on the cantonal level, so on the state level, they're actually in charge of implementing that. So they're in charge of supervising companies. They're in charge of granting the accreditation, VET accreditation, and they're in charge of training the traders. But the key element, I think, really in this VET system is the role of the companies, because without the companies, you can't have a dual-track VET system. So the companies, and more so actually their professional associations, they actually create the content, the training content for their apprentices. Why? Because industry knows best actually what kind of skills they need. So the skills plan, the education plan, the curriculum is continuously being updated by industry, and this way we actually make sure that the VET students that come out with the diploma, that they have the right skills that are needed for industry. So they also examine the apprenticeship trainers and ensure intercompany courses. So as I said, like industry associations have to make sure that if you have 3 students, they work in 3 different companies, that at the end of the 3 years, all 3 students have the same level of knowledge and expertise. So to give you a very concrete example of what a process looks like to develop a curriculum, next slide please. Okay, yeah. So it actually starts on the industry level, company level. So they recognize and perceive the need for either a new curriculum, a new profession, or to update the current profession. So they come together and they voice then that need to the trade associations. So the trade associations or industry associations then aggregate those different interests, make sure that it's not just in the interest of one single company, but that it represents the interest of the entire industry. So they analyze the needs and the situation, and then they request the launch of process for a new profession. So then with that, they approach the central government, so that is SERI, State Secretariat for Education, Research, Innovation, and they say, listen, we have perceived a need from our companies, not just from one company, but from the entire industry, that we need a new curriculum, a new profession. And for example, nowadays with digitalization, this is one of the big topics for companies. So also like there to kind of reflect that very fast going change. So the state, the central government then authorizes or not the launch of a new profession. Then the trade associations, the industry association then comes into play, creates a commission to reform, analyzes and defines the new profession, and drafts the qualification framework profile for that specific profession. Further? More? So at the end of the day, with all the details, and the central government SERI then drafts the regulations, so the ordinance. They consult all the different stakeholders on that, on those propositions by the trade associations. and then eventually they enact the ordinance on a national level. So as you see, it's a very close collaboration between the government and the industry players, and then also like the cantons, so state governments. So it's then up to the trade associations, together with the cantons and the states, to implement that. So from the very beginning, it reflects actually the need for skills, for new skills, and through a public-private partnership with the different government levels, they will create new professions. Next slide, please. So, of course, so there's a strong interest of the private sector to make sure that, one, they are developing people with the skills they need, but then more importantly also, the apprentices that they have in their companies, they don't do that for free. So they're actually being paid by the companies. And the companies pay that out of their own, if you want, pocket. So it's not subsidized in any way by the federal or state government. So there's an inherent interest among the companies to make sure that actually when you hire apprentices that they're also productive. And studies have been made a few years ago that the longer you keep an apprentice, so exchanges that are going on between Switzerland and India in the field of VET. We have actually about over 10 years ago launched a Swiss VET initiative India, which was which ended last year successfully. It was actually a program between Swiss companies based in India, together with the Skill Sonics, and we actually have one representatives here today in the front row. Skill Sonics, which actually also is inspired by the Swiss VET model and works with Swiss companies or actually any Indian company here in India. Most recently actually with Swiss Airlines. But then so more recently actually, Switzerland and India have signed an understanding of, memorandum of understanding that foresees an exchange of expertise, of knowledge, of experience in the VT sector that was signed in 2015. So there are regular commissions going on, committee meetings going on between Switzerland and India, where these kind of like practices, best practices are being shared in both directions. We also have organized by the Swiss Embassy in Delhi on a regular basis VET days, and more recently actually we were in Lucknow with our State Secretary for Education, Research and Innovation, and I think you'll see a picture just in a second, but his children actually, he has I believe 6 children, and 4 of them actually have done a VET track, and he's always very proud to say that. Even though he's the State Secretary also for universities, but he really highlights the importance of VET in the Swiss system. So, and another sort of aspect of exchange between Switzerland and India, but then also many other countries, is the role of Swissnex. I'll just mention that in a second. If we go to the next slide. So Swissnex actually is the, as I mentioned before, the research institution in Switzerland on VET. And so they advise Swiss VET stakeholders and governments, but they also started now advising foreign governments and foreign associations that have an interest in VET. So also since recently they offer modular courses for foreigners, foreign experts who'd like to go to Switzerland and learn about the VET system, like a 2-week course. So there are different offers by that research institution. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned before, we were in Lucknow later last year, actually, together with the State Secretary. Next slide. And so, as I mentioned, on the top left, you see Mr. Delambrojo talking about VET in India, sharing best practices with India. We had a booth, and again, Skill Sonics was an important part of that booth, with different Swiss companies and schools. And I think the highlight actually of that event in Lucknow is that we had invited 4 apprentices or 3 apprentices from Switzerland and one apprentice from India actually was part of such a Swiss apprenticeship model here in India. And actually I thought I'd like to end with their stories because they're really inspirational in many ways, and I wish they could be here today and tell to you their story. They actually got much more applause than the state secretary during the event. So this is Pascal Gerbel, so he must be now, I think maybe 20 or 21 years old. So he actually was a metal roofer. So he did like a 3 or 4 year apprenticeship as a metal roofer. And then he actually won the, or he represented Switzerland at the Euroskills competition in 2018. So the Euroskills competition is like a competition between many European countries in different professions. And so this was a profession of metal roofer. And so he actually won the gold medal of the best metal roofer in Europe. And what's interesting though is that he continued with his education. So he did like a federal diploma and is now actually going to study medicine at the University of Bern. So, you know, he started with being a metal roofer and is now studying medicine, which kind of shows the mobility you have in the Swiss VET system. Another example, or two examples, are Naomi and Sagaya Mari. So Naomi, she won the gold medal as a beautician at the Swissskills, so it's like a Swiss level competition. And I think very interesting also is like Sagaya's example. So she is a technician in the welding department of Bühler, which is a Swiss company close to Bangalore. They are producing food processing machines. And they have actually a VET model implemented in their company together with Skillsonics in the beginning. And they also have like a 3 to 4 year VET track where they hire apprentices, Indian apprentices, and Sagaya actually was part of that program. And I think what really struck me with both women, when they were asked, how do you see your future in your profession? Both of them actually said that they wanted to go entrepreneurial.